Jay Farrar in for Elias this morning on this beautiful Christmas Eve here in Montreal as Canada heads into the formal review of CUSMA. That's the Canada-United States-Mexico Agreement. All eyes are on Mark Carney and his approach to trade negotiations with the U.S., while some see him as strategically waiting out or calling the bluff of Donald Trump. Critics argue that his handling of tariffs and trade discussions has been maybe even inept or overly cautious, to say the least, potentially putting Canada at a disadvantage. Meanwhile, Carney continues to quietly negotiate with other countries, aiming to strengthen Canada's position before facing the U.S. directly. To help us unpack this strategy and what it all means for Canadian trade and the economy, we're joined by Jonathan Kalles, Vice President at McMillan Vantage and former advisor to Prime Minister Justin Trudeau. Jonathan, we're both in baseball caps and it's Christmas Eve, but I think we're going to have to try and talk some serious business here. What do you think?
I think we can manage it for a couple of minutes.
Yeah, I appreciate that. Hey, thanks for coming in on I think it was a little bit of short notice, but it's Christmas Eve. What else do we have to do, right, Jonathan? But talk about
exactly.
Yeah. Listen, some observers suggest Carney is essentially waiting out Trump or calling his bluffs on tariffs, while critics and the opposition claim that it is a sign of weakness or even ineptitude. So which one is it? Is it a deliberate strategy or a shortcoming, as some people are pointing out?
I think it's a deliberate strategy. I don't know if the strategy is to be calling Donald Trump's bluff. You know, we started out the year with a lot of uncertainty. It seems like 5 years ago that Justin Trudeau was still prime minister and only announced that he was leaving on January 6th. That was this year. So we've come a long way. We were hearing throughout the beginning of the year that we were going to be tariffed on a whole bunch of things. Slowly but surely, some of those were imposed. Some of those were repealed back. We had counter tariffs. We repealed a bunch of those. And where are we at the end of the year? Well, we're in a worse off position than we started the year, but we're probably still far better off than just about any country in the world. I would say any country in the world. 85% of trade with the U.S. is still covered by CUSMA, which means that it's tariff-free. So if you're working in the steel sector or lumber or auto or aluminum, those four key ones, then whatever anybody says about how it's better than any other country falls on deaf ears because they're suffering through this. They're losing jobs, plants are closing, and so that doesn't solve their problem. We get the sense, and we hear it from both sides, that they were very close to a deal in October on some of those, if not all of those. I don't think that deal would have meant that they would be tariff-free, but they would be reduced. Maybe there would be quotas, and after you went over a certain level, then there would be tariffs. We know what happened with those. We can't really tell why exactly that the Ronald Reagan ad that Doug Ford paid for, caused Donald Trump to just walk away from what potentially was a win-win deal. But we know how he gets offended easily. So clearly that didn't work. And so we're at status quo. Again, the status quo is not terrible. I suspect there are still behind the scenes conversations that go on, but they're not at a high level and we're not close to a deal. But what does that mean coming into 2026? Well, we always knew that the 5-year sort of review of CUSMA was going to come. And so here we are. I suspect that what we're going to get is a renegotiation, probably some kind of deal on that eventually. And so Mark Carney, I don't know that he's waiting his time, but I don't know that he can force the discussion with Donald Trump right now. So he's trying not to antagonize him. He's trying to keep the position we're in, which could be much worse, until we have the opportunity to improve, the deal we have, or at least make it less bad.
It's interesting because it was in the wake of those negotiations falling apart in October where we had that infamous uttering under the breath of Mark Carney where he did his little "who cares?" And it was perceived in many different ways. Who cares? This is a strategy for me to kind of prove to Donald Trump that I don't really care if you dropped out of the negotiations. I don't care if you're angry. Oh, who cares? I don't really want to talk about this right now because I'm in a bit of trouble. Or who cares? This is a negotiation tactic to call Donald Trump's bluff. And if so, as you mentioned earlier, when you first, off the top, you said that may be a dangerous thing to play with Donald Trump in this manner.
Again, we're going to try to read what "who cares" means.
Yeah.
We're also trying to read Donald Trump's mind, which is way harder than reading Mark Carney's. Mark Carney's sometimes, his answers that are seen as flippant, I think, are just who he is. There's a few things we do know, even without reading Donald Trump's mind, and that's that he doesn't really respect it will not benefit us if we're seen as coming to the table begging. Okay. Obviously, their economy is way larger than ours. And in many ways, we need them more than they need us. But he's doing two things at once, Carney. He is trying to find a way not to antagonize the president so that when we get to the nitty-gritty of negotiations, we get the best deal possible. While at the same time, he is going out there. You see him traveling the world. I've heard the opposition over time saying that he's running around the world for photo ops. But he goes to the UAE and gets $60 to $70 billion of investment into Canada, improving trade deals with Europe, being part of their military strategy. These are all things that will improve our economy, things that probably could have done or should have done years ago to not be so dependent on the U.S. He's got this two-pronged approach. It's part of his strategy, and he's going out and doing it as opposed to just waiting for Donald Trump to come to the table.
And, who's to say that, some of these side deals that he's making with other countries, it's not a given that they're going to make up with the potential fallout that could come with Trump if he does call the bluff. In 2026, if Trump does call the bluff and there is some fallout, how could this affect regular Canadians, not involved maybe in the steel, aluminum or auto industry?
I think so far we've seen that the economy has held steady, has been okay. We haven't gone into a recession like I think most anticipated it, but the economy is weakened, that's for sure. Unemployment is steady. It would probably grow if we were to lose a deal. Listen, CUSMA, as it stands right now, still benefits most Canadians, and it certainly benefits all Americans. And even then, the tariffs have raised prices for Americans. They're going into their midterms. And right now, Donald Trump is very low in the polls, in part because he hasn't helped with the cost of living. And a lot of that is because of tariffs, and people are starting to draw those lines. So right now, we're okay. But, if they rip up CUSMA, everything we import from the U.S. is tariffed. Everything we export to the U.S. is tariffed. Prices are going to go up in Canada. Unemployment's going to go up. So there will be direct hurt for almost all Canadians if the deal is torn up. I think we're a ways away from that. I'm not going to predict that it's not going to happen, but I think it would hurt Americans so much that I would be surprised if that were to happen before the midterms. It would be too dangerous. Probably, although, again, I'm trying to get into Donald Trump's mind, and that's a really silly
don't
idea.
do that. Don't do that. Jonathan, I want to thank you so much for taking the time today and talk about serious trade negotiations while we both wear terrible baseball caps. I want to thank you for that.
You're welcome. Merry Christmas to you, to all your listeners, to everyone out there.
And all the best to you and yours. Thank you so much. Jonathan Kalles, Vice President at McMillan Vantage, a national public affairs firm and former advisor to Prime Minister Justin Trudeau.
I'm Dylan Playfair.
And I'm Tyler Smith.
We're putting loneliness in the penalty box by talking to some of our favorite athletes about the importance of friendship.
This is Bromance.
Bromance is brought to you by Charm Diamond Centers, proudly Canadian-owned and operated. Charm has been part of your love stories and bromances for over 50 years.
And you can find Bromance on the iHeartRadio network or wherever you get your podcasts.